Hey guys, Ryan Earnhardt here from CreativeSoundLab.tv. Well, today I want to talk to you about my choice of DAW. I have done various different DAWs over the years, but I've been using Studio One now for almost a year. One of the most important things for me was how it interfaced with Outboard gear, and specifically this Pipeline XT plugin. This is the way that they send signals in and send signals out. So today is not necessarily a video about how to do all sorts of things on Studio One, but it's a video about how I interface Outboard into Studio One using the Pipeline XT plugin. Okay, so we have a song pulled up. It's Montana by Hustle Souls. Follow the link in the description to check out the band. Really great band. So for this example, I have a single track pulled up here. It is a microphone that's placed out in front of the kit, and I have it going into the 5020 stereo FET limiter. Now, I'm not actually using it as a stereo instance of processing. I'm just using, one side of the 5020. But you can see here, it's basically like an in-out plugin. I have the out, and I select my out, and then I have an input. I select the input. So out of the my converters, it goes out to the Patchbay here. And each of these patches is basically giving me access to the back of my converters, okay? But it's right at hand here. And out of the top row, it's normaled to go right into the input of all my outboard right here. So I go out of the output of my interface, which is the top row of my Patchbay, and the row right beneath it is the input to the outboard. So it's normal to go there automatically. So if I say out 13, I don't have to patch that in. It just goes there. And then the return of the outboard, so the output, is actually the very next one. So you have the digital, then you have the outboard in, and then the outboard out, and the output goes right into the interface input. So it's normaled, basically, to go out to the outboard and then back in again. Now, I still need to make a video on the back of the Patchbay and just how I use Patchbays. But the basic gist is that Patchbay allows you to automatically route signals. You can split signals, and then you can override that routing by plugging a 1/4-inch jack into the bottom input here. So it's really flexible. You don't have to use it as is, but without any cabling, things go automatically out of 13 right into the 5020, and they come back again. So with the patch out of the way, if we specify our in and out, then we're connected. We're good to go. So the actual Pipeline XT has some really nice features on it that are really handy to have. The basics are the in and the out selection, but we have the volume on the way out and the volume on after the way in. So if we are clipping the output, we can trim it down. If we're clipping the input, well, we would actually have to trim it down on our piece of outboard gear, but then we can boost it here to kind of make up the difference and ensure that we have enough headroom on our converters, but kind of return it back to something that's more comfortable and kind of, that works for the mix. Now, what's cool about this plugin is kind of the next three things. Is, for one, it will automatically detect the latency, and it's that fast. And we're lined up now. So it's going to automatically, system-wide, when I hit the space bar, it's going to make sure that this plays correctly in time. And it's not going to affect my mix. It's not going to affect my relationships with other drum mics, anything like that. So with that set, and it's set perfectly, okay, it does a really good job. Then we can actually do a mix of wet and dry. So this is cool, because now every single piece of outboard has a wet and dry now. Okay, it has a wet and dry. Now, if this didn't line up perfectly, then you go maybe 50-50 wet and dry, and it doesn't sound right. It sounds funny, it's kind of phasey, it sounds like it's kind of comb filtering because it's not lined up right. But because it does such a good job, you're able to do a wet and dry. So one kind of trick that I like to do is set this at 50% and then flip polarity. And then with the polarity flipped, then I can feather the output on my piece of gear. And with that output, I try to, as much as possible, cancel out the sound. So the polarity flip basically allows me to compare the wet and dry volumes and to try to null them out. And when they're nulled, the volumes of wet and dry are about the same. And we're at 50%, so that's kind of how I get a true 50% mix. Let me show you a little bit on how it sounds in context. And of course, while I'm playing around, I can go and actually load in a picture. Okay, so we're nulled out. So if we flip polarity again, this is kind of more of an operation mode. And the polarity flip is more of a calibration mode, you could say. And now with this, it should be equal parts wet and dry. Yeah, so very cool. It's very fast to set up. You just add this to the list of plugins. You set your output, then your input. You adjust the gain settings. If you want, you can calibrate it to get the wet and dry, or you can just go all the way wet, whatever you want to do. Another thing is that you actually can reorder these just like a plugin. So if you have multiple instances of Pipeline XT, you can have one going to the compressor, one going to an EQ. And then if you decide that you want to reorder your outboard, then you can easily do that. You just drag and drop. Let me show you kind of what that looks like. So first thing is add a Pipeline plugin. Then set the output. This is 8, so it's going on output 8. Control click there to unity gain on the output. It's going to go output 8, and then via normalization on the Patchbay, it'll go out of the 8 right in to the jack below it, which is the input for the EQPA. Then the output of the EQPA will go right back in. Same kind of thing. It comes in, it's normaled to the interface input on the jack below that. Now, it's easy to kind of get things mixed up. Like here, I just clicked this and I said, how isn't it working, And I realized, I forgot to set the input. So set the input to 8 again. There we go. I got a return now. See that? So it actually pings. And, for the most part, it will mute the speakers. But I usually will, mute the speakers when turning on and off this plugin. But as far as the actual setup, you never really hear it. And then you hit auto, and it adjusts, and now we're good to go. So let's see here. We have this EQ PA, and then we can add a picture just so I know what I'm looking for. So we have this, we have this. And we can have it this order, or we can have it this order. It doesn't matter. We could rearrange the order just by dragging and dropping. Let's check this out.
Police, and she is slyer than a cat. She'll make you buy her flowers, she will run off with your cash. Yeah, women call.
So that's with the EQ after the compressor, and then before that we had it before the compressor. What's interesting, especially with these kind of one mic captures of the drums, is we can really do a lot of damage with an EQ. It's almost like there's not any more addition happening. We can have some fun with the processing. We can really take it to the extreme. I would never do this with an overhead mic, but for something that's designed to capture the whole kit like this, you can really push and pull the tone, I think. So we have it going compressed, then we have it going out to the EQ. Now, I mentioned before about the wet and dry, okay? And that we can still do here, right? Nothing has changed. We have it synced, and we can do wet and dry. Okay, so pretty clear that's what's happening there. And let's just double check. Yeah, so we are synced. Now, here's the interesting bit. Say we want to do partially wet, partially dry. Okay, let's do a boosted 100, okay? We could calibrate this. We could flip polarity of the wet coming in and try to null it out. Okay, so, we can see that actually 0.44 is our true halfway point between wet and dry. Okay, so we've covered all this so far, okay? But here's the cool part, is what if we use this polarity as a coloration tool? So now, instead of boosting, could this actually turn into some sort of weird phase relationship, some sort of cut instead? You see what happened there? We're getting a really cool low end there. It's like really punchy, but it's super low. And we're canceling out parts of sound. We're allowing others through. This essentially is turning the EQPA, this Pultec style EQ is, the knobs really aren't a boost and attenuate. It's actually something very different. The attenuate's actually adding in sound again. We're taking stuff out of the null that's happening between the dry and wet, and we're actually bending the phase relationships, and we're sculpting the tone in a totally different way. So, the Pipeline XT, I mean, it seems like such a simple plugin, but we can add a dry-wet mix to any piece of Outboard. We can do some interesting tone sculpting by flipping the polarity on something like an EQ. But I actually have, in our next video, I'm going to be talking about how to pair, as a stereo pair, two different pieces of gear. And we're actually going to pair totally mismatched pieces, totally mismatched compressors. We're going to use it as a stereo compression technique on drum bus and even on stereo bus. We're going to actually pair two different EQs on the stereo bus, two different compressors on the drum bus. It's a really cool video. That'll be next time. But so far, this is kind of an introduction to how I use Studio One. And man, I love this Pipeline XT plugin. It's really sweet. I love the graphical quality to it that you can add in the picture. It could be artistic and cool looking, or it could just be an actual picture of your settings for recallability. So I'd love to know what you think of this. Be hanging out in the comments below.